Roll sound, sound speeds, roll camera, camera's rolling. We are back at segment 2, take 1. Let's do that one again. Kidding, we're still rolling. If you would like this actual slate that we use to mark our scenes for this particular episode, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel and put a comment below that you've subscribed. Be sure to read all the official rules in the description, but we'll pick one person at the end of the week and you'll get this slate. Hello and welcome back to Modeling Life in Cars. We're at episode 4 and today we're going to be building my 1979 Chevy NoGo Nova. Now there's a big myth around the NoGo Nova and we'll get into that in a little bit. But first I wanted to cover a couple things for this episode. One, at the end of the build, we're actually going to be giving away the model to one of our viewers, along with the slate that we used for production. So be sure to read below in the description for the official contest rules. So the model that we have to replicate my 79 Nova is actually a cop car. We're going to have to do a little bit of modification to make it match my piece of junk. So let's take a look inside the box. We've got some police sirens. Didn't have those, won't be putting them on the model. So this model has some nice chrome pieces on the sprue. It has 2 sets of wheels. A Krieger style wheel, like we saw before with the 1969 Dodge Charger, seems to be quite popular with model makers, and the stock wheels that came on it. My wheels were pretty close to these stock wheels, so that's what we'll be putting on this time. Here we have mostly interior pieces, and the interior of my Nova was severely beat up. The seats were all torn up, there were springs popping out of them that would poke you in the leg, and all kinds of stuff wrong with my interior. It really was just an everyday beater car that I'd picked up for almost nothing. Dashboard looks just like I remember. We'll give that some good weathering. Typical interior bucket. We'll paint that up. Whoops. We'll paint that up. Some kind of bracket. I'm not sure what we're going to use that for, but I'll keep it just in case. Steering wheel. Here we go. The engine. We've got the intake manifold, some engine parts. Wow. Now this isn't something you find in a model every day. We've got a large caliber shotgun, M16, and some kind of other fully automatic weapon. I guess these are the type of things you would have found in a 1970s cop car. Here we have the decals. We won't be putting any of these on. They're mostly sheriff and police type of stickers. I didn't have any badging on my Nova. It had all been stripped off. It was mostly primer, so we won't be putting on any decals this time. Here we have the tires that go with the car. Pretty good. I like again that they're not on a tire sprue. They just come separately. We'll save those for later on. Okay, so the only other thing we have left to cover is the body and the chassis. And you can see here that they're both molded in black. It's going to take a little bit extra of primer to get them covered, but we'll make it work. I picked up this Nova from a friend at school, and it was really in terrible shape. He'd given it to me for a couple $100. He was going to scrap it himself, but I said I would take it since I didn't have any cars to work on until I got my license. I figured I had a good 6 months and that would give me time to put some new paint on it, throw the new engine in, and get it in good running order. The car really was a piece of crap, but it had decent potential. So typical instructions, but these ones are to build the police car, which we're not going to be doing. We know that there's the engine, the interior, the exterior, and the body parts. So we'll just take these and wing it. Okay, there's the rear axle. Where's the front axle of this thing? Oh, that's what those little things are. There should be 2 of those. So I'm looking at the front wheel axle and the front brake assembly, and I'm reminded of my Chevy Nova. So I'd taken the front brake hydraulic lines and I'd put a lock on them so that I could lock the front brakes and let go of the rear brakes. Now, why in the world would somebody ever do this? And that wasn't my only trick. I had also taken some windshield washer bottles and installed them in the rear wheel wells and put a switch on those as well. And I wouldn't spray windshield washer fluid, I would spray bleach onto the rear tires. This made for the biggest white smoke burnouts that my friends and I had ever seen. And I couldn't wait to light up the high school parking lot. You know, there's a bit of a myth that goes along with the Nova, and that's that it translates to no go in Spanish. So it's the NoGo Nova, hence the title for the episode. But what's pretty funny is it's really a myth. The car actually sold quite well in South America and Spanish-speaking countries. You know, Chevy did ultimately change the name, but there's a huge petrol company in South America that goes by the name Nova. So if anybody was going to associate the name Nova with anything, it would be with that company, which is petrol, which is associated with the car, not NoGo. It's kind of like one of those things like my last name, Ford. I can't tell you how many times growing up that probably even some of the people watching this video called me found on road dead or fix or repair daily. You know, all these memes that just stick with cars over their lives, but a lot of them are just myth. And it's true of the Nova as well. All right, so before we build the car, we're gonna go ahead and paint the parts on the sprue. So the paint on everything in this car was either dirty, grungy, peeling, or just plain even not even there. It was a 1979 Chevy Nova. It'd seen a lot of life, a lot of owners, and I really got it at the tail end of its life, and it was really just a driver for back and forth. That was hopefully going to be a bit of a hot rod when I got a new engine in it, but we'll see more on that later on. So my Aunt Debbie had a friend, and he would often borrow this car. It wasn't registered, and I still didn't have my license yet, but he would often take it to his girlfriend's house. He'd get drunk somewhere, leave it at a party, call me, we'd go searching through neighborhoods trying to find the car, eventually find it and drive it home. This went on for months while I was waiting to get my license. One time, I went to go over to pick him up at his girlfriend's house, and I kid you not, there was an axe stuck in the front left fender of the car. We yanked it out, and I parked the car back at my Aunt Debbie's house. I never got around to fixing the hole, and it started to rust out pretty bad, along with the whole driver's side of the car. My aunt's friend fell asleep at the wheel one night and coasted along a chain link fence. And just for my buddy Will, I'm gonna go ahead and use my marker right here. That's why I keep it in the vest, not because it looks cool. And I'm just gonna go through and do a little bit of touch-up with the Sharpie. I like to use a Sharpie instead of a paint when I'm doing touch-up because it's really efficient, it works well, and they come in multiple colors. So this 1979 Chevy Nova was the end of the muscle car era. After this, Chevy started shifting towards smaller front-wheel drive platforms. There was a Chevy Nova in the 1980s, but it was a tiny little front-wheel drive compact. And all this was driven, of course, by demand for smaller, more efficient cars. I was only a couple months away from getting my license. This car was starting to come together. I still hadn't put the engine that I wanted in it yet, but it was drivable with the straight six that it had, and it actually ran pretty well. I mentioned earlier that we put a front brake lockout system so that we could do burnouts with this car. Well, one time we thought it would be funny if we did one in reverse. So I put the car in reverse, I locked out the front brakes, I started revving it up, and I started peeling out in reverse. And it was one of the coolest things you'd ever seen. The rear speakers were missing from the back deck, and there was smoke actually puffing up as I was peeling out in reverse. All my friends thought it was hilarious. Up until the point where the front brake lock slipped, and the rear of the car went flying straight into a telephone pole in the parking lot. Lesson learned, no more burnouts in small spaces. I was only a couple months away from getting my license when my aunt's friend had asked me if he could borrow my car again. I said no problem, he tossed me $50, so it was no big deal, or so I thought, because I didn't see him for a couple days. And when I did see him, my car wasn't with him. I asked him where it was, and he said that he couldn't remember, he'd forgot where he'd parked it again. So we went to his girlfriend's house, we looked around the neighborhood, no car. Again, it wasn't that big of a loss. I'd only paid a few $100 from a friend, hadn't put much work in it, and the car was actually doing more rusting than it was running. But I was kind of bummed out because I was back to having no car at all, and my license test was only a couple months away. So I took my license test in my aunt's car, got my license finally after so much drama, and after never getting to really drive any of these really cool cars with a license. But at least I could borrow her car, go and hang out with friends, and save my money to get a car that I could really put some time and effort into. We'll cover my aunt's car in the next episode, because I ended up buying it off her. You'll find out why and hear more in the next episode of Modeling Life in Cars. And in case you're wondering what happened to the NoGo Nova, a few months later I got a call from a junkyard. Turns out the car had been towed because it wasn't registered and they found it parked on the side of a road. And they traced the VIN back to the guy that I had bought the car off. He said that he had sold it to me, so they called me. Now, the car had been sitting in an impound yard for 3-4 months. And the guy on the other end of the line asked me if I would like to pay the fees to come get it. I said, I'm not even sure this is my car, but I'm curious, how much are the fees? His answer was $3,500. And my answer to that was, Nova? Never heard of it. So, the Nova ultimately found its demise in the junkyard, probably in a crusher. Just like this. Just kidding. This one's actually going to go to one lucky fan. We are really making a push to get our YouTube channel up to 100 subscribers so that we can get a custom URL. And we need your help. So head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Then put a comment below that you've subscribed to the channel so that we know who you are. When we get to 100 subs, we'll pick one follower and send you this actual model. That wraps it up for this episode of Modeling Life in Cars and the NoGo Nova. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we're going to take a look at my Aunt Debbie's 1987 Hyundai Excel GLS. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and if you get some time, go over and check out our Patreon channel. There's all kinds of membership tiers with great rewards. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.